If you've ever tried to sharpen one of these, jointer blade, no, it's not necessarily as simple as it initially seems to be. Today I'll be sharing more about a tool that just may make the process a little bit more manageable. This is the Veritas Jointer Blade Sharpener, and in today's video I'll be telling you how it works, how well it performs, and if I think it's worth adding this tool to your sharpening setup. How's it? My name is Dylan, this is Ply Creations, and as always, a very warm welcome to my workshop where I share tips, tricks, techniques and how-tos on woodworking. And if you are interested in woodworking or like working with your hands, you're in the right place. Today, as I mentioned earlier, we deep dive into the Veritas Jointer Blade Sharpener. Bit of a mouthful, but anyway, we'll go through the process of setting up the jig, through the full process of sharpening a blade. We'll touch on blade geometry a little bit as well in the process, and at the end I'll give you my honest opinion about what I think about the tool. Let's start today with a quick overview before we start with the setup. The tool is specifically designed to be used with jointer blades from 4 inches up to 8 inches, common sizes and as far as jointers go. In the metric world, that's roughly about 200 mil all the way down to 100 millimeters. And the tool or the jig is designed primarily to be used with the Scary Sharp system. And what is the Scary Sharp system? Well, it's the name given to a system where abrasives like sanding paper is stuck to a flat surface, and that is used to sharpen and hone the blade. You can use the tool with normal sharpening stones like diamond stones, and Veritas makes a suggestion in the guide that you build a block on which this area will rest and you do your adjustments from there. I've tried that and it's not that easy, especially considering the fact that almost none of my sharpening stones are from the same manufacturer, and as a result they're not the same thickness, which means I'm constantly needing to adjust this in the back, and I'll show you how that works in a bit to be able to effectively sharpen and remain a consistent or keep a consistent bevel on my blades. So designed primarily for jointer blades. It does have a trick up its sleeve though, and I'll show you later at the end of the video what else you can use it for to sharpen. So I'll be taking you to the bench. First we'll be setting up, installing the blade, then we'll go through the sharpening process, of course finding the bevel, and then going from there. So I'll bring you into the bench and I'll explain to you exactly how to go about setting up the tool. You've got the body of the jig. In the back here you've got a threaded rod or threaded knob that will adjust the angle of your blade or adjust the angle of the jig up or down so that you can hit the correct angles on your bevels. Turning around this way around, you'll see that we've got 3 clamps or hold down clamps that keeps the blade down. Each one of these clamps of course has a tightening knob, and it's got in the front it's got a short leg, and in the back it's got a longer leg. You've got 2 stops here. That allows us repeatability when we swap out the blades. My jointer's got 3 blades and I'd like to sharpen them all the same. You've got 5 different positions here. Depending on the length of your blade, you can then move actually any one of these components within those 5 holes to adjust according to the length of your own blade that you are using. On the angle setting knob, it's also got a line demarcating the position of the knob so that you know in which direction you're turning or how many turns you turn the knob to adjust the angle. Veritas states that a full turn, I think, is half a degree up or down depending if you're going in or out. To install the blade, and this is where I differ slightly from Veritas's manual, they suggest that from the back of the back bevel, of the back of the primary bevel, backwards to the front edge of your jointer, of the jig, that needs to be 1/8 of an inch. That's around about 3 or 4 millimeters roughly. I find that is too little, and I tend to use 1/4 of an inch or about 6 millimeters. I find that if I use, as stated, the method suggested by Veritas, that I'm not lifting the jig up enough to hit the correct angles, and I end up taking away metal from the jig itself. I don't know if I'm doing anything wrong. If you do use the jig or you have any ideas of what I might be doing wrong, I'd love to hear from you in the comment section, and drop a note there. But I think it has somewhat to do with the angle that I use on my blades, and I'll talk about angles in a little bit. The blade goes in upside down or bevel down onto the jig. So I slip it down under the clamps, roughly position it, keep it in position with my thumb and one of the clamps, preferably one of the ends I find work better, just very slightly tighten it. Do be careful, even blunt jointer blades can be sharp and they can cut, so do be careful when handling the blade. I then turn the jig over, keeping it in with my fingers, and then I just check where I am as far as that bevel position goes. And if I'm not mistaken, that was beginner's luck, I'm at 6 millimeters. So I'm on the other end also going to tighten very slightly. Check that distance, that's about 5. There we go, 6. In the middle we are at 6, and at the end shift it slightly. We're again at 6. So all the way 6. That now allows me to tighten the blade down. The cutting edge or the bevel is now parallel with the jig, and that's where we want it. Turning it over. Ideally the short leg, or what you want with the short leg, is to actually clamp the blade over the body of the jig. It needs to be positioned over the body, and Veritas also suggests that the tightening knob is as far forward towards the blade as you can get it. I'm going to reposition this clamp, just make sure it's in the correct position. Finger tight, this one can come back a little bit, knob all the way forward, and finger tight again there. Once I have the blade in position, I'm just going to check it again. Nothing is shifted. Still happy with the distance. Now I bring my stoppers forward to the back of the blade. What this does, it allows me to easily swap out my other blades. It does two things. It allows me to sharpen all the blades to the same angle, and also keeps the blade parallel, or subsequent blades parallel, to the jig itself. Now we need to find the correct angle of the primary bevel. We will be working the primary bevel first. For that I use the marker trick, nice big one. Make sure it's a permanent marker, anything else will just rub off. I'm going to go over to my coarser paper that I have. This is 180. Shift that up slightly so you can see. That is 180. So few strokes, and as luck would have it, I am removing material away all the way along and the width of the primary bevel. If you would be adjusting it, as you would check where you are removing ink, adjust that knob either in or out to adjust the angle up or down. It does have a lock nut, and once you found the position that you want, engage the lock nut and you're ready to go. Before we continue, I just quickly want to mention something, or a couple of things, about blades and blade geometry. So I did mention that I'll be working on the primary bevel, so this is this bevel here. I'm showing a graphic on the screen of what I'm talking about, but I am adding a secondary bevel to this blade as well, and that will be then at a higher angle, and I'll show you how we go about forming the secondary bevel and then ultimately sharpening it. I'm not too concerned about the flattening of the back of my blades, although I have flattened it, they are only nominally so. In cases where the blade angles are not mentioned, or you no longer have access to the documentation, aim to hit the angles that your blades are sharpened at the moment. If you find that your machine's performance is not what you expect it to be, you can then start to experiment with your own angles. Onto working the primary bevel. I use window wash liquid, as I do with all my sharpening systems, and I do the same here. I did mention that I use wet paper on the Scary Sharp system that I use. Squirt that onto the paper. I also add lubrication to the glass itself. The jig has a hard, almost like a plastic nib at the bottom, as you can see there. That rides on the surface, and I think the plastic is there to stop wear and tear. However, on the glass I find that it wears quite heavily unless I put some lubrication on the glass, and that's why I do that. Placing the jig down, I then place even pressure along the full length of the blade. Also, you don't need a lot of pressure, and just move back and forth. Be careful that when you stick your paper down that you don't push the blade over where you've placed the double-sided tape, because the double-sided tape lifts the abrasive slightly from the surface and therefore will affect the angle at which you're working your bevels. Also, I will do the primary bevels on all my blades before I go to the secondary bevel on the blades. I've set it to the primary bevel. If I now adjust for the secondary bevel before I go over to the other blades, I have to come back and reset for the primary bevel. So I'll go through each stage with all three blades before I move on to the next stage. This is 180 grit, and I'm working the primary bevel. I'll be going to finer grit for the secondary bevels, and I'll take you through that process as well. Now, I have been working on this bevel here. When you wipe it off, do be careful. It is starting to get sharp already. I can feel a burr. Quickly want to show you how easy it is to swap out the blades. I keep the blade down with my thumb and then simply release the clamps. Remember, it's only finger tight, and remove the blade and put that to one side. Get the next blade, remember, bevel down. That just slips in under the clamps. Keep it down with my thumb again. Move the knob as far forward as Veritas suggests, and then tighten all three clamps. Just to check how accurate we are. That is 6mm, 6mm, and 6mm. So these guys are doing their job. A little bit more lubrication. Going over to doing the secondary bevel. Happy with the primary bevel, and we're starting at 320 grit. Advancing the knob and lifting the jig will make the angle steeper for my secondary bevel. I'm going to put some lubrication down. And you may very likely not be able to see this, but I can see probably a millimeter back from the primary bevel, or the very cutting edge. I can now see that I am forming a secondary bevel. So I think I ended up at around about 4 turns. So in effect, I have lifted the angle or increased the angle by 2 to 3 degrees. You only continue until you feel a burr, and I can feel a nice burr all along the full length of the blade, and it is starting to get a nice sheen in a parallel line all along the length of the blade, which means I am hitting the very, very cutting edge, and that's really all it takes. So I'll be going over to 600 grit. I'll bring you back when I'm busy at the 1200 grit, just to show you a different angle of how I use the tool. We're about to go to 1200 grit. This is the final grit that we'll be working on as a final polish. I find that 1200 is sufficiently sharp for my work. It being, of course, the final grit, it's really just polishing up the edge. And that's it, that's done. And you can see, hope you can, at the cutting edge, I can't see much of it. There we go. got a nice shine to it, so it's nicely buffed. What I like to do before I install the blades is I always give these blades and every other blade really that I sharpen in my workshop a coat of oil, and then they're ready for installation. So we have 3 jointer blades, nice and sharp, or shall we say 6. I have 2 sets of blades available to me, and I had to practice before I made the video, so now I have both of my sets nice and sharp. Of course, I don't have any blades in my jointer at the moment, and that's the subject matter of the next video that I'm about to start filming. The jig in this little box is going to be involved in the process, and it makes my life so much easier than it used to be installing blades and getting them aligned. If you haven't subscribed so yet, please do so, and keep an eye on my channel for when the next video drops. Before I leave you though, I'm going to go run through the pros and cons of this jig and why I think you might want to get one for yourself. So let's get straight into the breakdown, starting with the pros. It's a Veritas tool, so quality-wise, no issues there. The second one is it allows you to sharpen your tools or sharpen your blades with a high level of consistency, which I find quite useful. Lastly is, and this is for me the biggest one, is the fact that I don't need to send my blades away to have them sharpened and wait for them to come back. And that is a big one for me. Not all pros though, there are some cons that you may want to consider. One is the cost. At the time of filming this video, Lee Valley had the jig on their website for just over $80. I'm assuming that's Canadian dollars, so depending where you are in the world, the cost may be a little bit too high. Secondly is you need to get your sharpening equipment out to sharpen the blades, and not everybody likes doing that. I don't mind, I like sharpening my own blades, so for me that's not an issue. Lastly is the fact that the easiest way to use this system is to use Scary Sharp. If you don't have Scary Sharp available in your workshop, you may not want to incur the cost of getting a sheet of glass and flat surface and dedicated abrasives and so forth. So that may be a negative for you. In summary, who might consider getting this tool? If you sharpen a lot, you may consider being able to do it yourself. Also, if you don't have any facilities near you that will sharpen your blades for you, that may be an issue. So in those cases, it's a good idea to consider this tool as an option. Who may not want to get the tool? Well, if you don't use your jointer that often and you maybe only sharpen once a year or not often enough, it may be better to have the cost to get a second or even a third set of blades and then send your blades away for sharpening. And then you may not want to get this solution. I did mention though that it had a card up its sleeve, and this may push you over the edge. I'm showing a photo of the jig with one of my spoke shave blades in it. If you're not comfortable shaping or sharpening blades by hand and you are using honing guides generally don't allow the use of or to be able to sharpen short blades, and this may provide an option for you to be able to do so. I sharpen all my stuff by hand, so I wouldn't be using it for that purpose, but that may be the final tick in the box for you to get this solution from Veritas. And that summary brings us to the end of another edition of Ply Creations. Thank you so much for watching and joining me in my workshop. If you use the Veritas jig or any other method to sharpen your jointer blades, please leave a comment in the comment section. I'd like to learn how you find the Veritas jig or any other method that you use, and I look forward to reading your comments. As always, if you have found any value in this video, please leave us a thumbs up and consider subscribing. As always, I'm leaving the link to my website at the bottom of the page, and you'll also find that and other links in the description. But as always, thank you so much for joining me in my workshop. I hope you have a good one, and I hope you stay safe in your own workshop. Careful of those sharp edges. Hope you have a good one, and cheers.